A parent tells a 5-year-old not to touch the cookie jar, then leaves the room. Within seconds, small footsteps head straight for the kitchen. Nobody explained why the jar mattered. Nobody needed to. One instruction, and the jar becomes the only thing in the house worth touching. This isn't a child being difficult. It's one of the most reliable patterns in psychology, and it doesn't disappear with age. It just gets quieter. Psychologists call it reactance. The idea is simple. When people feel their freedom to choose is being restricted, they experience an uncomfortable internal pushback, and one of the fastest ways to relieve that discomfort is to do the exact thing they were told not to do. The instruction itself becomes less important than the fact that a choice was taken away. Psychologist Jack Brehm introduced this idea in the 1960s, calling it psychological reactance theory. His research suggested that the strength of this pushback depends on how important the restricted freedom feels to the person and how directly it's being blocked. A minor suggestion barely registers. A firm command, especially one that feels unnecessary or unfair, can trigger a surprisingly strong urge to do the opposite, even if the person had no real interest in that behavior beforehand. One of the clearest demonstrations of this came from an unlikely source. In 1975, researchers ran a simple study on jar-based toys with children, restricting one toy behind a barrier while leaving another freely accessible. The forbidden toy, despite being no different in quality, was consistently rated as more desirable once it became off-limits. The restriction alone was enough to change how appealing it seemed. Adults show the same pattern, just with sharper language to explain it away afterward. This explains something that seems backward at first. Reverse psychology, telling someone not to do the very thing you actually want them to do, works precisely because it borrows this reflex on purpose. It doesn't create motivation from nothing. It redirects motivation that was already sitting there, waiting for a restriction to react against. Think about the last time someone said, "You probably won't be able to finish this anyway." For a lot of people, that single sentence does more to spark effort than almost any encouragement could. Not because the person suddenly believed in the task more, but because being told they couldn't triggered a need to prove otherwise. The doubt became the fuel. There's a second layer researchers have identified, closely related but slightly different: the forbidden fruit effect. Studies on restricted access, from banned books to age-restricted content, consistently find that simply labeling something as off-limits increases how desirable it appears, independent of its actual content or quality. The restriction itself adds perceived value, almost like a small tag reading "worth wanting" attached to whatever was denied. That reframes a moment you've probably experienced. That sudden urge to finish a show everyone said was too controversial to watch, or to try a food someone insisted you wouldn't like, wasn't really about the show or the food. It was your mind responding to the boundary itself, treating restriction as a subtle signal of value. And this is where it gets more interesting, because entire industries have quietly built themselves around this exact reflex. Luxury brands manufacture scarcity on purpose, limited releases, wait lists, invitation-only access, not because supply is truly constrained, but because restriction reliably raises perceived worth. Negotiators use a version of the same principle, deliberately withdrawing an offer to make the other side want it more. Marketers write "only 3 left" beside a product for the same reason a parent's "don't touch that" sends a child straight toward the jar. Even in relationships, someone who seems slightly less available often becomes more compelling, not because they're objectively more appealing, but because their attention now feels like a freedom that might be withdrawn. It's worth being precise here, because reverse psychology isn't a guaranteed trick. Research on reactance shows it works best on people who already feel some ownership over the decision, and it can backfire entirely with people who don't respond well to perceived manipulation or who simply don't care about the restricted behavior to begin with. Some psychologists also caution that overusing it, especially with children or in relationships, can erode trust once someone recognizes the pattern. It's a real psychological lever, not a universal shortcut. You might notice this dynamic show up in smaller, everyday moments too. A coworker mentioning, "You don't have to read the whole report," and something in you insists on reading every page. A friend casually saying, "I don't think this restaurant is really your kind of place," and suddenly you want to prove them wrong by loving it. These aren't stubbornness. They're the same reflex, quietly triggered by the smallest suggestion of a limit. So once you understand the mechanism, what actually helps, whether you're on the giving or receiving end of it? If you're trying to influence someone, the honest version of this isn't manipulation, It's offering real choice instead of disguised commands, since people resist control far more than they resist a genuine option. If you're the one feeling that sudden pull towards something you were told not to do, it helps to pause and ask a simple question. Do I actually want this, or do I just want the choice back? Often, naming that difference is enough to quiet the reflex. Which raises a stranger question than it first appears. How many of your past decisions, the shows you fought to watch, the people you chased, the paths you insisted on taking, were genuinely yours? And how many were really just freedoms you refused to let go of? Sometimes the biggest change doesn't come from trying harder. It comes from finally understanding the pattern you were living inside. And once you see that pattern, you rarely see yourself the same way again.